In 2018, National City police officers arrested a black man named Earl McNeil. They used a full-body restraint device and a mesh face covering to bind his arms and legs. McNeil had a heart attack in custody. A year later, in 2019, officers held a white man named Tony Wilson against the ground and tased him repeatedly. He stopped breathing. And in 2021, officers confronted a Latino man named Ryan Umana. He was walking barefoot in the rain, holding a machete. The officers tased and shot him 8 times. In all 3 cases, the families of these men say they were experiencing mental health crises. Independently, each of the families sued the city, accusing officers of using excessive force. In all 3 cases, national city leaders decided to pay to settle the lawsuits instead of allowing them to go to trial. This past February, they approved the final settlement, $1 million for Umana's family.
I want there to be some transparency and accountability.
Sophia Bendari is the daughter of Wilson, the man who was held down and tased. She says it felt like the police used her father's mental illness and the fact that he had used drugs and had been in and out of jail to try and paint his life as less important.
They literally talked about my dad like he was a piece of garbage. And it's like, he was a human being, you know?
Joanna Schwartz is a professor of law at UCLA and a national expert on police misconduct litigation. She says lawsuits like these are opportunities for cities to examine what might have gone wrong and what changes they could make to prevent future fatal encounters.
There may have been wrongdoing by police. There may not have been wrongdoing by police, but you're never going to know the answer to that question unless you actually look at the information in that lawsuit and try to understand what went wrong.
But often, Schwartz says that kind of reflection doesn't happen.
What I have found is that often law enforcement agencies don't even do that first step of trying to learn from the lawsuits that have been brought against them.
In the 7 years since that first in-custody death, elected officials in National City have made some changes.
Who killed Earl McNeil?
Under pressure from the public, the city council pushed to keep police officers from being the first to respond to people in mental health crises.
Drop the machete now!
Marcus Bush is the vice mayor of National City.
The police were considering it before, but it wasn't as big a priority. So these incidences, unfortunately, push it to priority, push it at the forefront.
The city already had a program called the Psychiatric Emergency Response Team, or PERT, county mental health workers who respond alongside officers. But the county has struggled to fully staff the program, and their teams are not always available. In June 2021, the City Council voted to partner with the county to deploy a new program, the Mobile Crisis Response Teams, or MCRTs. The police chief at the time, Jose Tellez, said it was an important step.
Police responders that not having to answer these calls or being the first ones to respond is it's a good thing.
MCRT teams are also made up of licensed clinicians, but they do not include any armed officers. They're also dispatched primarily through the 988 crisis number instead of 911 and are available 24/7. National City was one of the first cities in the county to sign up.
When I look at year over year, we're doubling our call volume every year.
Bree Lane is a program administrator with Telecare, the company that runs the MCRT program for most of San Diego County. She says 4 years in, they're seeing positive signs.
People are feeling more comfortable to access MCRT. It means law enforcement's accessing us more for people they're coming in contact with.
In 2023, the city also launched a small team of caseworkers to respond to homelessness-related calls. They do coordinate closely with police, but their team also does not include armed officers. But when it comes to these civil rights lawsuits, it's unclear what the city has learned from them. The police department declined multiple requests for interviews and refused to say what lessons they're learning from these cases, or whether they have made any changes to their policies.
What could we do better? No, we have not had that conversation. I think we should.
Bush, the vice mayor, says the police department has made strides when it comes to building trust, but he acknowledges that the city council needs to more openly discuss these cases.
I think where we leave it is, this incident, this was really bad. This is, let's make sure this doesn't happen again and let's move on. But we don't take enough proactive steps to, okay, what are we making sure to help and make sure this doesn't happen again?
Bush says he hopes to change that pattern by having more discussions on the council and expanding the role of the city's Citizen Oversight Board. Bendari, Wilson's daughter, is hopeful about some of those changes.
Admitting you have a problem is part of a resolution, you know, and I think that's huge. It really, really is, you know.
Above all, though, Bhandari wants to remind city officials that people in crisis are just as human and deserve to be treated with just as much dignity. In National City, Kori Suzuki, KPBS News.